the creators who brought you RuPaul's Drag Race and $1 Million Listing. This is World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome everybody to the Wow Report. I'm Fenton, co-founder of World of Wonder, joined as ever by James St. James, editor of the Wow Report. Looking lovely. And Tom Campbell from the UK. Yay, Tom.
Hello.
Welcome.
Freshly landed, full of jet lag. Excuse any mispronunciations and things this episode.
But
You look very vibrant.
Apparently he's across the street from Windsor Castle where the Queen is holed up with COVID.
If at any point you hear a raspy cough, it's Queen Elizabeth. Because that's how close I am to Windsor Castle right now, where she's staying.
Close your windows because it's so infectious. If she just coughs out of the window, we'll go right into you.
And now there's the new variant, the Omicron BA, originating in London.
What does that do?
It's more infectious than Omicron, apparently.
Okay.
People are a little mask-free around here. I'm a little nervous for me, but everyone pray. But we're really kind of bearing the headline.
Oh, well, I wasn't going to come out. I'm like self-hating. I have COVID. I'm speaking to you with COVID. Yes.
And you are isolating in the desert.
Palm Springs, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it does make me have a very croaky voice. So
well, I think you sound very sexy. I'm in love with this. I'm crushing on the new Fenton.
Thank you, James. It's about time you loved me after all these years.
It took COVID.
And with that, I was like, we're counting down the top 10 things that made us go wow this week. Let's jump into the countdown. Number 10, Tom.
Number 10.
This week marks the 50th, 50 anniversary of a little film called Lady Sings the Blues.
Has it been 50 years?
She's got 'em bad. It is Diana Ross is Billie Holiday in Lady Sings the Blues. I think the first time I saw it was on ABC Sunday Night Movie. I was drawn to it. I fell in love with Diana Ross in the 70s. I didn't know about the Supremes. I was too young. I have since, of course, gone back and learned every Supreme song and legend and B-side and never released song. And it's every generation has their Britney or their Beyonce or their Billie Eilish, because they sort of, you're at the right age when the artist is peaking and Diana Ross from the 70s. Oh my God. She's so beautiful. It's also Black History Month. So Fathom Events, which teams with Turner Classic Movies, the only thing I watch on television with any regularity, had screenings of Lady Sings the Blues at theaters around the country. I think there still is one on February 28th, but I went on February 20th, and the theater was a little empty. It was 3 p.m. I brought Bree from work, who's a huge Diana Ross fan. She's a youngster. She's in her 30s, so I feel very good. And I kept looking. I literally looked around the theater as it was happening to see, because I thought Diana Ross might come in. She might just pop by. She lives near there. She might just sit in the back row for a while. And I told Bree something that you guys probably remember, but the first time I knew Diana Ross was on Twitter is when she was like, "Hey, you guys, I lost my fanny pack at the Rosses in Culver City." And she found it through Twitter. Mm-hmm. So that's who Diana Ross is now. But then she was spectacular as Billie Holiday. Do you have any?
I've never seen Lady Sings the Blues. Mahogany is my sort of 70s Diana Ross reference.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, The Wiz is my 70s Diana Ross. But I remember watching Lady Sings the Blues. And even though she doesn't physically embody Billie Holiday, she gets it. And she gets the voice and the tragedy and the trauma. And it's such a revelation. And if it hadn't been for damn Liza Minnelli and Cabaret that year, Diana would have taken it all the way.
The other interesting fact is that it was the first time in history that 2 Black women were nominated for
Liza Minnelli isn't Black.
No, Cicely Tyson and Diana Ross. And then it happened again last year with Viola Davis, and I'm going to go blank because I'm jet lagged. But all I will say is it's not, it's, you know, it's full of historical
Pathos.
inaccuracies. It's blended together, but it's like the most beautiful oil painting in the world because it's her performance, you know, vibing on Billie Holiday. It's very melodramatically, but plays up the racism of the time that she lived through in really effective ways, including where she goes off the bus. She's with a white band, and she goes off the bus to take a pee, and she walks upon, you know, comes upon a lynching and a family, you know, taking the body off the tree, and then it cuts to her freaking out, and then Lady sings Strange Fruit plays, which Billie Holiday was very famous for singing, and whatever.
And just the pathos of the heroin addiction is done so beautifully, and it was one of the first times I think I'd ever seen drug addiction on the screen when I was a child. It's funny you talk about how you were aware of Diana Ross before you knew about the Supremes. My first album was a Paul McCartney and Wings album, and I had no idea about the Beatles. I thought Paul McCartney and the Wings were the best band ever. And then I heard about the Beatles, and I was like, I thought that was his like starter band before, and had no interest in them whatsoever.
Oh my gosh, James, I love that. But Paul McCartney did have a moment with Wings, you know, with
It was Band on the
Jet
Run, yeah,
and oh my gosh, what
and
else
Live and
was
Let
it?
Die.
Oh,
But
yes.
for me, with Diana Ross, and my sister was a huge Wings fan too, to be able to find a whole catalog of incredible work that exists before you were fans of them is such a bonus. It got me through my college years because I didn't go to class, Lord knows. But Fenton, at some point, I saw it in a theater, and I have to say, why I am screen agnostic, I realized for me, being in a theater in the dark, I do totally surrender my attention in a way I don't at home.
Of course, there's a magic to it that is unequaled.
Yeah.
It's just that, you know, we have to be screen agnostic because we can't all go to the theater now, right?
Exactly.
So, where can we see Lady Sings the Blues?
It's one more Fathom event. Look it up, Fathom Events. It's going to be in the theaters, and if not, you can rent it. And it is a spectacular. Richard Pryor, Billy D. Williams. It is.
Oh, Billy
amazing
D.
thing to see, too.
Williams in 1974 was it? Oh my God, so handsome.
I think one day we have to do a whole 1970s episode because there was an aesthetic in the 70s that I don't think has really been unpacked.
You go from Star Wars to Mean Streets, and I mean, it's everything. It's just, you know,
it's everything. And everybody said, I remember in the 70s, everybody said 70s sucks, 70s so awful. But to me, it's the most rich, varied, and slightly bonkers period.
Well, you've got Three's Company and Jiggle TV. I mean, like everything about media in the 70s is just
platform
insane.
boots, flared trousers.
Yes.
And mahogany and things. Anyway, okay, let's go on. Number 9, James.
Number 9.
I watched the 9-part series Inventing Anna on Netflix, and if you guys have not watched this, it's absolutely bonkers. You talk about bonkers entertainment. It is insane. Anna, of course, was the fake German heiress who captivated New York society while she was bilking them out of millions of dollars. And Julia Garner from Ozark plays her. And she talks in this accent like you've never heard before. Nobody has ever spoken like this in the history of the world. You're such a basic bitch. Like your clothes. Look at your hair. You're just awful. And she plays her as this narcissistic monster who there's no redeeming qualities, and you do not understand why every single person just becomes obsessed with her. And it's mind-blowing, but it really happened. And let me see. Anna Klumsky is the reporter, the New York Magazine reporter who becomes obsessed with her and tells the story, and it becomes the biggest story in New York Magazine's history. And Anna Klumsky, who is so great on Veep, is a nightmare here, and she is ultimately the big villain in the story. I don't know how but she is so unlikable and so relentlessly nasty and self-absorbed herself that she makes Anna look like, you know, Mother Teresa.
So she's the reporter?
She's the reporter. Anna Klumsky is, yes. There's also Laverne Cox is in it. Stewie from Succession is the lawyer, and he's so hot. He's really wonderful. And a guy named James Cusati Mayer, who is the hot fashion homo, and he's a real find. But you know, that she bilked money lenders and hotels and banks and society people out of all this money. Like, you don't really feel bad for these people because they're all horrible. Every single person that she bilks is horrible. She's sort of like a Robin Hood thing, which is why I guess everyone was so obsessed with the story. But I kept finding myself like being furious with these people who were like ride or die, and they kept making excuses for her, even as they were given every red flag and they knew what was going on, and they kept supporting this narcissistic monster. And then I had a light bulb moment. It was like, it's because I supported a narcissistic monster despite every red flag. And I'm the idiot that is not learning any lessons from this. And it was like this whole like, oh my God, I'm like I hate these people. I hate myself. And Anna never even killed anyone. And so like, I'm even worse than these idiots.
You're referring to your friendship with Michael Ehrlich,
Yes,
aka
I'm
Party
referring
Monster.
to another monster, a party monster, who and we all were,
But
guilty
Michael
of.
was okay. So Michael was charming and charismatic, and you're saying that Anna was not.
No, she isn't. She's not pretty. She's not nice. She doesn't coerce you with, she does buy you dinner, on her fake credit card and stuff. But she's ultimately just like, it's hard to spend time with this character. And especially because each episode is like an hour and a half, and there are 9 of them. And by the time you were like 15 hours in, you were like, make it stop, please, mommy.
Did it
I
need
think
to be
it's
9 hours?
fascinating. I'm sorry. I think it's fascinating that most people would watch this series to go to a total escapist place and see a world they'd never be let into. And James sees it and learns a valuable life lesson, like it's an after-school special.
Well, the fashion is pretty. They spent a lot of money on the clothes, and she does. Some of them are fabulous.
I've read that the fashion's incredible, and I've read that she got paid like $320,000.
Well, that's the whole thing. And that's one of the big problems of it, is that not only did Netflix pay the reporter to get the story, so they already have the story, but then they paid Anna Sorokin $320,000. But when they already had the story, but because of the Son of Sam laws, Anna couldn't use it for herself, so she used it to pay off all her debts. So not only did Netflix pay off the debts of this woman, but they made her more famous in the process. So she walks out of prison with no debts, and all these
Very Robin Hood. Very Robin Hood.
Yeah. So
Well,
she
that's
actually
the,
ends up, like not having to pay restitution to anybody because of Netflix.
That's the amoral cult of the algorithm for you.
Yeah.
Let's go on to number 8.
Number 8.
Okay, so here's the headline. Francis Ford Coppola, legendary film director, right? One from the Heart, fill in the blanks. He is going to spend $120 million of his own money on making his next film, which is going to be called Megalopolis, and is something that it's a lifelong passion of his. It's a sci-fi film. I believe it's about utopia. I really don't know very much about it. He's just wanted to make it for years and years and years. And I guess Hollywood has always said, no, 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 no. And now he's, God bless him, he, in defiance of all sanity, of all algorithmic reasoning, he is going to spend, and says, I don't care. I'm going to spend $120 million to make this film. And I posted a thing on Facebook saying, oh, I can't wait to see how this turns out, which I think read sarcastically, but actually I meant it sincerely. I really can't wait to see how this turns out, because I think in the world we live in, too many things are done by committee, and that the single vision of a single person is sadly absent from the cultural landscape these days.
Forget about committees. Talk about the algorithm. We've always had committees. Now it's like a whole computer.
But the downside of that is that you have things, and we've talked about like how nobody says no to Ryan Murphy, and nobody edits him or says that, like when you have somebody who it's their vision and they do what they want, and you get like what was the Island of Dr. Moreau? Remember that was a big debacle because nobody was able to say no to Marlon Brando and nobody was able to say no to the director. When you have somebody who nobody can say no to or stand up to, then you often get these mishmashed monsters of like,
James,
narcissists.
no, James, no.
That's why I love you,
No.
James, because you always say no to me.
But I think it's funny, Fenton, that Francis Ford Coppola of The Godfather fame, like the only movie you could remember was like one from
Places
the heart.
from the heart. Places from the
Well,
heart.
it's
Places from the
COVID
heart.
brain, that's my excuse.
COVID brain, is that what it is?
Yeah,
That's funny.
he also made Apocalypse Now, which I must confess I didn't really like. But I did love One from the Heart. I just remember Vegas never looked so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, One
Wait,
from
no,
the
he
Heart.
did do The Godfather, didn't he? Wasn't that Coppola? Yeah. Okay.
1, 2, 3. Yep.
He did lots of amazing films, none of which I seem capable of thinking of right now. And then he lost. Didn't he lose his fortune on the Cotton Club? I believe, right?
Oh, right. Well,
because
that was another debacle where he had too much power.
Yes, he's king of the debacles. He would all his films always went over budget, but he was also a technological pioneer. He built Zoetrope Studios. I think I'm right in saying Zoetrope.
Yeah.
I could just be babbling at this point. You can cut this all out. But he built these amazing studios, lost his entire fortune, and then made a whole nother fortune in wine with vineyards in California or wherever it is, up the coast.
Napa.
Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Napa. And
I'm enjoying this fever dream of Fenton's today. I believe him. He's never been more lucid.
Exactly. Sophia, his daughter, of course, made that brilliant movie Lost in Translation, and then that very weird mannered movie Versailles. I mean, I just think that
Marie Antoinette, but it was also Virgin Suicides is just talk about your fever dreams. That's gorgeous.
Right. But I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see that film. And then, I know it's been in the works for a while. Madonna's film written by her about her, starring her and her daughter. I can't wait to see that too. Although that might be a slightly different experience, but
Well, no, but I think nobody will say no, Madonna, and Diablo Cody learned that the hard way, didn't she?
Oh, yeah. Apparently, she was. What I don't know. I don't want to misspeak because I know Madonna's listening, but she was removed from the project or something. But Madonna's probably writing it herself. But I really can't wait to see it. And I think there is something to be said for why does a movie have to be good? I think movies can engage us even if they're sort of train wrecks. And in fact, I think we're seeing that the bomb can be kind of a special kind of genius. Like, remember we all used to talk about Ishtar and
Ishtar is a great movie. I had more fun at Ishtar. I remember Musto's review was one line and it said Ishtar spelled backwards is rat shit.
That is,
and it isn't, but he said.
If we're gonna do one word reviews, Musto's one, I think, or was it Steven Salen's for Yentl was mental, MENTL. Anyway, let's go to a break before I just ramble endlessly.
Well, I have a question. What is so special about the last 8 days of this month, February 2022?
We'll be right back after the break with the answer. You're listening to the Wow Report on Radio Andy.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. I'm Fenton here with Tom and James and Blake.
Yes, and I had a question. What is so special about these last 8 days of February 2022?
Well, I know.
I believe it's a string of palindromic dates.
Yes. That's right. It's palindrome week plus a day.
All right, let's go on with our countdown of the top 10 things this week that made us go wow. Number 7.
Number 7.
Have you heard of pickleball before last week?
No. I think that I have a pickle phobia. and that I've never tried a pickle in my life, and just the word pickle makes my skin crawl. So I think you're doing this to torture me right now.
I'm gonna, just as a trigger warning, I'm gonna use the word pickle a great deal, James, in this regard.
Can I just say, speak to that, Tom? I actually gave James St. James a pickle Christmas tree ornament, thinking it was the funniest thing to do. It's he hasn't spoken to
James has just walked off camera. He's walked off mic.
No, I have it right here.
Pickle ornament.
I have my pickle ornament in my kitchen to always remind me of the time you tortured me with the pickle ornament.
Well, pickleball has nothing to do with pickles. It is the fastest growing sport on the face of the earth. And basically, it has been embraced since its origin in 1965 by lots of, let's pay attention, you guys, senior citizens, because it's sort of a combination of badminton and table tennis and ping pong, and it's a wiffle ball and a paddle and a low net and a very confined area. So that it supposedly, it takes years to learn how to play tennis. Speaking of the 70s, I played tennis in the 70s because everybody was, and I wasn't very good. But I'm kind of excited to start some pickleball, because they're merchandising lots of pickleball outfits at Dick's, sporting goods and all that kind of stuff. And it all began in Bainbridge Island off of Washington State and Seattle. And they thought it was named after this waspy couples. They were kind of bored, and they made it in their shed when their kids came home and were bored. Very, very, and they said, the rumor was that it was named after their dog Pickles, but the lady says, no. Pickles was named after the game that she thought it was. This is such a waspy term. I don't know if I'm saying it right. But in crew, when you do crew, that they have the leftover people from every boat. They put them together, and that's called the pickle boat.
I love that.
It's very waspy. It's very James St. James.
We had a tennis court in our backyard when I was growing up.
See?
And we had to play. They had a tennis instructor who would come, and I was just terrible. And I always remember this. This doesn't even matter, but it would go over the fence and into the river, and he'd say, "Another one for the fishies, James," because he was Scottish, and he'd always scream, "Another one for the fishies," and that, in my mind, that is something that.
Well, there's an article in the New York Times. There's many articles. The New York Times has broken the story that it's happening. There's so many pictures of senior citizens with gobs of white, face cream to not get sunburnt, playing pickleball. And their celebrity endorsement is Matthew Perry from Friends. And I love Matthew Perry, but and I'm one to talk, but Matthew Perry may not be the fittest of the Friends. And yet he's obsessed with pickleball.
Pickleball is the new shuffleboard, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's a sexier, and I feel like we're close to having a pickleball Olympic thing. It's showing up there. It's getting airtime, on ESPN3, the Pickleball Network. It just pickleball makes you feel good to talk about. Makes me. I had no idea you didn't like pickles, James, or I would have thought of something else.
No, it's fine.
They had a pickleball tournament on the latest season of Vanderpump Rules as well,
So it's not just for old people anymore. The beautiful people are picking it up.
You can be young and lazy. Pickleball.
I always imagined you in Fort Lauderdale growing up playing polo.
No, it was all I don't play. No, it was tennis, and it was just trauma.
What about croquet? No croquet.
We played. Yeah, we had croquet. My mom would play croquet a lot.
All right,
because you can smoke and play croquet.
The New York Times are going to buy the rights to pickleball.
Yes, perhaps put it behind a paywall.
Exactly. Pave paradise and put it behind a paywall. Number six.
I watched the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie on Netflix, and it is it's another requel. It is not a sequel or a reboot. It's a little bit of both, and this time it's 50 years after the first one, and a group of social media influencers buys a small ghost town in Texas with the idea of turning it into a social media utopia, and invites down hundreds of other social media influencers, and they're all going to live in the town, and it's going to be like an artist commune, and everybody's going to just Instagram each other all day. And unbeknownst to them, Leatherface has been living in the abandoned orphanage this whole time, and he, even though he's 76 years old now,
I was gonna say, how old is he?
he's getting up there, but he picks up his trusty chainsaws and starts whacking down the Instagram hoes one at a time, and
Leatherface might be a candidate for pickleball.
well, maybe he is, but he gets another face and he puts on his new face and he's running around and everything. And it's completely ridiculous. And there are 1,000 plot holes and none of it makes any sense. But there's this one scene that seems very real to me. And there's a party bus. And everybody is on the party bus drinking and dancing, and the music is going, and there's like everybody is squeezed in this little bus, and Leatherface gets on with his chainsaw, and immediately it's like a record scratch, and everybody stops and turns, and in unison turns on their Instagram live feed. They start live streaming it. And you see the comments scrolling as he's like chopping up everybody in the bus, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, so fake!" And "Oh my god, I want to party with him." And it's just like one after the other, after the other, after the other of everyone like, "Where is this? I want to go!" Like, and you just feel like if a serial killer is coming at you, like your first instinct now is to start live streaming it, you know? So. It's
your description makes it sound really good, because all the reviews I've read have been absolutely terrible.
It's an awful movie, and every single person who dies is just so awful and unlikable that you're cheering Leatherface as he's doing it. But it was a wonderful way to spend a Sunday morning.
I love the way you say Sunday morning, so you can't be caught out at work. During the week.
No, I did watch it over the weekend. I promise. I watched both of these over the weekend. But
James, what's today? Quick, what's today? Never mind. He has no idea what day it is. He's making it up.
But there was an interesting thread today on Twitter talking about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and how the idea behind the fact that what's so scary about it is that America is so huge that there's pockets of evil everywhere, and you just have to lift up a rock and you're going to find a nest of spiders, and like any house in anywhere can house evil. And if you just stumble across the wrong house at the wrong time, you're killer fodder.
That's a real thing, right? Rather than
that's real. I mean, that is America has a lot of sick and twisted, like in little towns in Texas, you go for miles and you'll just see a house in the middle of nowhere and you think, what the fuck goes on in there? And it could be a family of cannibals. We don't know. I mean, like,
but could be some guy just watching like horror movies on a Sunday morning.
But more, I mean, but the fact is we, you see these weird houses in the middle of nowhere, and you just think like, but for the grace of God, like I could stumble in there and never stumble out,
But what the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on a true story, was it not?
Well, it's based on the Ed Gein, which is what Psycho was based on, which is what I mean. There've been a bunch of movies based on him. He was basically more of a grave robber than a serial killer, but he did have human lampshades and made out of skin, and he wore a skin mask and things like that, I guess. My thing is doing something weird. Hold on.
Number 5. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Get it? Number 5. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Contact has begun. Now, this is I don't know if I should say documentary, but it's notionally a documentary about ongoing contact with aliens. And I started to, I don't know how I even stumbled on this. And why, when you're looking for something to watch, do you watch the thing that you know you don't want to watch and that you're saying to yourself, I would never watch this, but when I could be watching The Gilded Age, but I choose to watch Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, Contact Has Begun. And it starts off very much as you'd expect, and you know, aliens are here and lots of video of alien encounters, but then it does actually get really interesting because this guy, Stephen Greer, who I think is probably crazy, he says he is leading a sort of psychic operation to be in contact with the aliens. Because he's saying, look, they're here. We've heard about UFOs for years. The government's denied them. Now they're beginning to say they're here. But he's saying, let's just skip all that and let's make contact with the aliens by getting together and getting in circles and doing psychic things. Because he then explains that the universe is so big, you know, hundreds of billions of light years, that actual space travel, the way we conceive of it, isn't really possible. And the only way to do it is at the speed of thought. And so he makes this kind of quite alluring connection between ESP and mental thought, the idea that actually that's the way to contact the aliens. So it looks a little weird. He's leading all these seminars of groups of people doing these sort of consciousness meditation things and claiming to make contact with aliens. I haven't got to the end of the whole thing. I will finish it. Jeremy Piven is narrating it, which gave me pause, you know, as I actor with troubled reputation. So it's probably like sort of authenticating the fact that I am watching a crazy documentary. But I just thought it was interesting. And then he said, look, he said, you know, Hollywood has for years basically the conspiracy, as Darren would say, the conspiracy here is that the aliens are out there and that they're a hostile force. And he says, no, they're not. You know, if they were hostile, they would have eliminated us with their technology that is billions of years ahead of us eons ago. And even though so that we're constructing this paranoid fantasy that the aliens are hostile. And, you know, he quotes Trump and the Space Force and puts Hollywood in the crosshairs of all the Hollywood films with aliens. I mean, most of them.
Well, Stephen Hawking famously said that, you know, he had a whole theory about how we're either going to be pets or slaves, and we aren't going to be friends because there's no, you know, they're so advanced from us that there's no, you know, equal.
Right. And the counter to that is, well, if that is the case, they would have done away with us and we would have already been enslaved, what have you. So
and why were they helping build the pyramids, and why were they helping, you know, all those other things? Why, you know, yes, they're obviously
they're hanging around and they're hoping that our sort of inherent what's the word, deep-rooted hostility won't prove fatal to ourselves or, you know, to them. And that,
or maybe they're waiting for us to get to a utopian point where they can come. Yeah.
And there was an interesting moment. I don't know if this is true, but they said that if you get a windowless room and you put a plant in one corner of the room and you add a light that is on a random generator shining all around randomly, the light will start shining on the plant in the corner more than anywhere else. And so the idea being that the plant has the ability to think, and that the plant's thoughts are able to manifest a change in the way the light behaves. I know.
Or is it that light gravitates towards the living?
Well, there you go. But the point being that
no such thing as being random, and that the random always ends up finding a pattern.
Right. And the unconnected things do actually end up showing some kind of connection.
Yeah, I mean, there is no chaos because everything has to end up eventually into a pattern. I do think, though, that there is something to that, where to the other point that, you know, like when shamans and you know, wise men and everybody would take their magic mushrooms and stuff to see God, that they were just opening up their minds, and that is when they would make contact with aliens or gods or whatever it was. You know, I mean, like I think that your mind is probably powerful enough to meet the aliens. Let's do it.
For those
That
of you
is
listening to the
ayahuasca,
radio,
meet
I've
aliens.
been nodding thoughtfully a lot during this segment.
Yes, Tom is probably calling some hotline to have us both taken away in straitjackets. Like, yeah, I am going to finish this documentary, and especially the idea. He says one of the ideas is that the universe is just a thought. And I said, oh my God, that's so. And then I went to sleep. So, let's take a break. I think it's a good time for a break.
Excellent.
Blake.
I've got a question. I think you guys are going to guess it, but I thought it was super interesting anyway. This skier from Finland was doing the 50-meter cross-country ski, and something on his body froze. What was it?
Wow. Gosh. Thank you, Blake.
Yeah.
Finally, a question I can answer. You're listening to the Wow Report on Radio Andy. We'll be right back after the break.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. I'm Fenton here with James and Tom and Blake. And I know that during that break you haven't tuned out because you want to know.
So a Finnish skier was doing the 50-meter cross-country skiing race, and something on his body froze. What was it? His name is Remy Lindholm. He's 24.
Well, if it was Remy, it was probably his butthole.
James, you know the answer. You're just like...
His penis froze off.
It was, and he said he used a heat pack to help thaw it out, and it really hurt when it thawed out.
Oh, he could have.
I was going to say, I hope
he could have just used my warm breath.
Oh, dear. We are counting down the top 10 things that made us go wow. And we've reached number 4.
Number 4.
This is a long story. I'll try to make short. But you know how I follow a lot of people just to eavesdrop on their lives, and they let me. And there's the guy, David Mason, can't pronounce his last name, who owns Slick It Up, which is like high-end designer fetish wear. And I enjoy his posts, and I like him, and I judge him, and all those things. And through him, because I also see who people are, I'm thirsty. I see who people are hanging with, and I befriend them. And if they're stupid enough to befriend me back, this is all on Facebook, so it's mutual. There's this big, giant, like Hercules-looking guy that's been modeling for him. So I follow him. He's a Drag Race fan. We don't talk, but I just get a sense that they seem like fun people, even though they're giant, masculine he-men. And the Hercules guy put on Dave Mason's, whose last name I can't pronounce, his page. This is the movie I was telling you about. And it was a movie it was a link to a full-length film on YouTube called When Betty Met May. When Betty Davis met Mae West.
Well, this sounds right up our alley.
Exactly. The algorithm was working for me. So I click on it, and it's sort of it's a reenactment documentary where an actor, this is like 5 years old now, but he's a red vest, and he has someone playing Betty Davis and someone playing Mae West, and they kind of look like them, in that drag queen kind of way, but they're women, And he starts off by sort of talking by himself, the maker of the film, and he says that I was, I knew Betty Davis in the '60s, and he sort of implies there's a bunch of gay people around Betty Davis, there's a bunch of gay guys around Mae West. They'd never met. They brought them together, and that night I was bartender, and they took a picture. We see the Polaroid of the real Betty Davis and the real narrator, from 65, and he said right before May came into the house, I said to all the gays around, shouldn't I tape this like on a cassette tape recorder? And they said, that's a great idea. So the movie is people lip syncing to the dinner party.
Actual Betty Davis and actual Mae West.
And it's really rough. And people give it like sort of like mean reviews. It's not like it's a huge release, but it's fascinating. And the idea that somebody taking something that's such a prize, such a gift, and making something of it, I guess so okay, that would be enough if the guy who made the film's name is Wes Whedon. And I'm thinking, is he on Star Trek? Like, why do I know the name Wes Whedon? Have I slept with Wes Whedon? Wes Whedon is my optometrist.
What?
What is
It's
happening?
the best story ever. And when you go to see Wes Whedon, who's on Santa Monica Boulevard, he's been many places, but he's like 2 down from Circus of Books. Circus of Books, the hair cutting place that's always been there, and then Wes Whedon. It's very legitimate. He's so classy. He's such a good optometrist. He's, a man of a certain age, a little older than me, very well put together, very kind. And when you go sit in his office, and, left, right, what's better, there's pictures of Elizabeth. Like, he has worked with everyone. And now I have this, so I already had an appreciation for him. And I tell him I do Drag Race, and he's like, oh, yes. But he was.
Have you gone to, you have to go get glasses and talk to him about it.
I am going to go back. I adore him already. And now that I know that he made this film and that he really has earned his stripes as a sort of like legendary gay.
Lens crafter for the stars.
Yes.
So just so I'm clear, your optometrist had a dinner party, recorded Betty Davis and
Mae West.
Mae West together, and then made a film lip syncing to that audio.
Yes.
Yeah, he has an actor playing him. He has an actor playing. There are actors recreating the entire event that they use the tape recording as the soundtrack. So it's a lip sync.
Post the link. Where can we watch this film?
It's on YouTube. It's called When Bette, B-E-T-T-E, When Betty Met May, M-A-E-Y. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's fucking fascinating. And shouldn't we all tape a dinner party and then make a movie about it 40 years later?
Wasn't that what Warhol was trying to? I think Warhol would have that party, that show where it was all the parties and he would tape it. But anyway, the bearing the lead here, first of all, how weird is it that Betty never met May in all their years
I know.
in Hollywood? And what was how did they react to each other?
I haven't seen the whole thing, and I was going to watch it before I left, but it starts off with Betty saying they were supposed to meet at the Otto Preminger, like festival, like some kind of tribute to him. And Betty and May wasn't feeling well, so she didn't want to give everybody her cold. I mean, it's a very banal but fabulous conversation, which I love banal conversation. Yeah. And Betty's like, nobody was there. And then they cut to like a picture, and it was a hall filled with like thousands of people. But Betty's like, nobody was there. It was awful. We couldn't wait to leave. But she was like, nobody big was there. So I'm going to keep watching it, but it's fascinating. And once I found out it was Wes Whedon, I just did a cartwheel in my home.
That's crazy. In Hollywood, I mean, you can't swing a cat in this town without hitting somebody who was friends with Mae West or Betty Davis. It's just crazy.
All right, we're going to post that on the Wow Report because it sounds must watch. Number 3, James.
Number 3.
I watched a documentary on Hulu called Kurt Vonnegut Unstuck in Time. And it is not only a biography of, the iconic great author who wrote Cat's Cradle and Slaughterhouse-Five, and it's just a, beloved. God, he's just so iconic. But it's also the story of the director, Robert Wide, who it took 40 years for him to make this movie. He filmed starting in 1980. He filmed right up to the Vonnegut's death in 2007, and then sat on it for 15 years. Like, what do I do with all this footage that he has? And so it's sort of his story about his friendship with Vonnegut and how they travel around together and become really good friends. But what's fascinating, well, Vonnegut himself is just a fascinating man. I mean, he goes through so many tragedies in his life. His sister dies in just this horrific way, and her husband, she's on her deathbed, and her husband is coming to visit her, and his train goes off the tracks and goes into the river, and he drowns. And then when they bring the newspaper to her about her husband, she dies 20 minutes later. I mean, and then he has to raise her 5 kids. Vonnegut has to raise her 5, and his mother died of suicide. And the big defining event in his life, of course, was in World War II when he was in an underground bunker in Dresden. as the bombs rain down. And totally, I mean, Dresden, you know, is one of the great tragedies of the human civilization, where they just took out the city. They just leveled the city. And he talks about coming out of the bomb shelter and seeing just the destruction of like what the violence that man can do. And that's, of course, the basis of Slaughterhouse-Five, is the bombing of Dresden. And so, but you have him talking about all these things, and for every tragedy that happens, he tells these wicked jokes, these evil, nasty jokes, and cracks himself up and starts laughing until he's wheezing and coughing and choking on the laughter. And they, after a while, it's like really disconcerting, you know, but he's like, what else are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, you got to laugh or you're going to die.
Absolutely.
And he's like, and that's throughout the whole movie. He's just talking to students and he's talking at book clubs and this and that. And he's just, I mean, a wicked man. And his jokes are so inappropriate and so awful, but he's just fascinating. And if you, I mean, Slapstick, his book Slapstick, changed who I fundamentally am as a person when I was 14 and I read it. It's his most loathed book, but it changed how I thought of art. It changed how I thought of humanity. It changed how I thought of just everything. And so I'm a huge fan. And if you aren't a fan, pick up a book, pick up one of his Cat's Cradles, any one of them, and start, and then watch this documentary.
I did a major high school term paper on Kurt Vonnegut novels. Like, I should reread them, because I'm sure there's one little, this is a tidbit, it's such a weird one, I don't even remember what it's from, but he was talking about how when you meet someone on a plane, you have a really good conversation. It means, there was some science fiction word for it, that they come from the same place you do, like from before time, and that when you die, you'll return to that place. But like you find, like, while you travel this earth, you find those people. And they said that's why when some spouses die, their other spouse dies right away, because they're going back to that place.
They're going back, they're rebooting. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you know, Breakfast of Champions, Cat's Cradle, Dead-Eye Dick. I mean, so many of these books are just so iconic. And he's just, we lost he was a great living genius, giant in our time, you know.
We have his work.
I love that. I'm going to read, actually, I read Slapstick. I don't think I've read any of his books. So
Slapstick, yes. If you read Slapstick, it's so about now. It's the world after a pandemic, and it's just fascinating and funny and creepy and crazy and just.
I swear to God, Fenton, if you read Slapstick and turn into James St. James, I will never forgive either one of you.
You have to read the foreword, because there's a foreword where he's talking about rolling around with his dogs and how much he loves his dogs, and then every single thing from the foreword ends up happening in an allegory later on in the story. It's just every time you see like the phrase being used later on, and it's just fantastic.
Oh wow, okay.
Kurt Vonnegut.
Sounds like he would have liked that Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Definitely.
Number two, I watched on Netflix Downfall: The Case Against Boeing. Really
Against
profoundly...
Bowie. Against Bowie?
Yeah, against Boeing. You may remember that in 2018.
Oh, wait, I heard Bowie as in David Bowie.
No David Bowie in this.
I'm very sorry. Carry on.
Boeing, the airplane manufacturers.
Yeah.
You know, every time you get on a plane, James, the chances are it's on a Boeing plane. Yeah. And that's why you want to watch this documentary, or maybe you don't, because Boeing had a reputation for being the safest airplane manufacturers in the world. And, you know, they made the 747, they invented and built the 747 and revolutionized air travel. And it was one of those crazy dreams. You know, it wasn't based on market research. It wasn't based on algorithms. They just did it. They were going to build this plane, and they built it. And it was the most amazing thing. Unfortunately, after Boeing was taken over in the 80s by McDonnell Douglas, their reputation for safety changed. It was all about keeping the share price up, Wall Street, what have you. And that shift in the culture manifested itself with the MAX jet in 2018, they had pretty much in a row, 2 airplane crashes where the Super Max jet just plunged into the ground and obviously killed everybody on board. And I don't know if you read about this at the time, but everybody was like, why are these planes falling out of the sky? They were brand new planes. And so this documentary tells the story of what happened. Basically, Airbus were competing with them very successfully, and they brought out a fabulous jet called the Airbus Neo. And Boeing was caught on the back foot. They didn't have anything. So they went back to I think it's a 737, an old trusty model, and said, well, let's soup it up. Let's make it, more environmentally friendly, cheaper fuel. And they came up with the Max jet. And the whole idea was, it's a new jet, but it's an old jet. And because it's an old jet, you wouldn't need to go through all sorts of regulatory approval. You wouldn't need to do any pilot training, which is very expensive because the pilots have to go into simulators and they can't fly the planes. So they push through this Max version of the 737 and say you can fly it just like you've flown a 737. You can just get on and fly this plane. No, unfortunately not, because the new green economic engines had to be mounted in a different way, which changed the whole weight of the plane,
right.
which they fixed. They fixed that by introducing something called the MCAS. And the MCAS was a piece of software that would detect if your plane wasn't flying right and force the nose down.
Yes. I've been here. I remember this story. Yes.
Only problem is this would require pilot training.
Yes.
So rather than do the pilot
encounter it.
training, they didn't tell the pilots that this system was in place. And so no one knew flying the plane that an override would suddenly jump in, take control of the plane, and plunge it into the ground.
Oh.
And this happened not once, this happened twice. And Boeing at first said, because it happened in foreign countries like Ethiopia and Indonesia, there was all this sort of assumption that these foreign people don't know how to fly their planes. And they kept on saying the plane was safe, the plane was safe.
Of course.
And it wasn't. They had 10 seconds from detecting this problem. They had 10 seconds to fix it. Fix something that they had never been told about, had no idea existed. And the second crash, they actually did know about it. They'd been told about it, and they did know, and they did what they were supposed to do, and it didn't work.
Well, it seems like, it's sort of a miracle that it only happened twice. It seems like it could have just happened hundreds of times simultaneously,
Yes. I mean,
terrifying.
Boeing knew it could have happened with 15 planes over 35 years. But they had a document saying that, and they were like, okay,
Right, risk management.
It is the most horrible story. And I wish I could say there was a sort of satisfying ending to the film in the sense that Boeing got their just desserts, but actually they didn't. They had to pay $2.5 billion to avoid criminal prosecution.
Well, that's a drop in the bucket. That doesn't hurt anyone.
But
Too big to fail.
They paid nothing to the families. They never.
And then they probably all gave themselves bonuses at Christmas.
They never apologized to the families.
Ugh.
The CEO left Boeing with a $60 million bonus. They never apologized to the families. It just left me with a really bad taste in my mouth.
It's time to rise up and just eat the rich, man. Right. Just down with everybody.
So that is Downfall, the Case Against Boeing, a really depressing documentary on Netflix. Let's take a break. Right after the break on the Wow Report, we'll reveal the number one thing this week that made us go, wow.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. I'm Fenton here with Tom and James, and we're very excited to welcome Blake this week to reveal the number one thing that made us go wow.
Number one.
I want to talk about my favorite. Well, it's probably one of my top 5 favorite episodes of RuPaul's Drag Race of all time. This past Friday, the queens had an acting challenge, and They didn't really know what they were doing. They were filming a soap opera for the Daytona Winds. And then when it was time for Ru to reveal their finished product, it was all one big fart joke, and it was hilarious.
They all did a straight acting challenge, and then Ru and Tom and everybody inserted fart sounds.
As much as I would love to take credit for that, because I think it is a genius idea, it was Ru. He had sent it to me like in the middle, like when we were not in production, like months earlier. And I'm like, we're working on the creative, which Ru's very involved in. He goes, "Whatever happened to that thing I sent you?" I'm like, "What thing?" I literally had seen it and forgot about it. He goes, "Daytona Wins." And so we looked at it, and it's the idea that it was, drag racing families in Daytona who were, at war with each other. And it was all dynasty done. It was like very rich. And we wrote a script, the writers and, who are amazing and great, do a great job. And we brought it to Ru, and Ru was like, "It's not really what it needs to be." And we sort of sat there and just wrote, and Ru was like, "Mama, I can't believe my ears. But the Michael's wedding is off. I can't marry him, Mama. And, I'm sick to my stomach." And so we just did all this like crazy cliche stuff. And we threw in a couple extra kind of like, "I can't believe my ears." Lots of poses. And then in post, the night before the Queens had no idea, they put in fart noises after everybody's line.
So stupid. Oh my God.
I watched it unfold on Twitter. I wasn't watching, but I watched the thing. And people love to pick on Drag Race anyway, and we're used to it. But like scatological humor really cuts both ways, if you'll pardon the expression. People were like, "Oh my God, you ruined it. I can't stand." But it was so relentless, and it went on for so long. The sketch.
It was one of those jokes that went from being funny to being not funny to being so not funny that it was funny again. Yes. And then it was like meta. It just kept going. All these different levels of fart jokes.
It was its own requel, right in the thing.
It jumped the shark, or I guess you jumped the fart, right?
What do they call that when you have a shark? Jump the shark? Is that what you said?
Jump the shark, jump the fart.
Yeah, I love it.
Also, do you remember though that in the era before memes and viral things, the Robert Tilton fart tape? He was a preacher. He would be like, "Touch your television set right now," and he'd run around the studio, and there was a tape that went round with him farting, and it was so everything just had fart sounds on it. Never fails,
It was hilarious. I was barreled over laughing the entire acting challenge. So kudos, and watch RuPaul's Drag Race season 14 airing now tonight on VH1.
Well, it's been a banner week for Drag Race Productions because the Pangina Heels story, that is Twitter, social media just literally you turn on Twitter and that's anyone is talking about Drag Race. Everyone and anyone is just Drag Race.
Tonight's episode, music composed by David Steinberg, wow, celebrity, and it is a girl group challenge. The year is 1964, and it's a battle between the RuPreams, the Shangri-Las, and the Runettes, and it's dedicated to Ronnie Spector. So,
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, James. Thank you, Blake. Same time, same place next week. Until then, go out and do something that makes the world go
wow.